Yeah, as we ease our way into the final lecture of the course, please make note of what the remaining obligations for the completion of the course are. Come today.
Yes.
If your buddy's not here, please text them and tell them they need to come. Many of your colleagues, believe it or not, are like standing at the edge of a cliff. Some of them are like back doing that back diver thing where their toes are on the edge of the cliff and they're looking down. And they're like staring over the edge of the cliff. They're saying, "Oh, it wouldn't be so bad to take this course again next summer. Oh, maybe it'd be fun." Right? So help them off the cliff. Text them and tell them they should come to class today. Right? You tell them. And next Tuesday. We have class next Tuesday?
Yeah.
Of course we do. It's very clear. 11 lecture, 11 section. 10 lecture, 10 section. One lecture today, one section Tuesday. Is there any zero? No zero. Tuesday is our final class meeting.
Well,
Okay.
actually, talking about the business,
Tuesday is our final physical class meeting. You still have obligations beyond next Tuesday.
That's crazy.
It's crazy, but it's architecture school and we bow down before the godlike figure of studio. And we clear the decks and we cancel everything so that you can succeed and excel and shine in studio. It's a weird, archaic, kind of stupid thing we do, but this is what we do.
so actually, business things. Tuesday is our last meeting in person class. So we have an evaluation. And if you don't come, you will miss that evaluation.
I think there's two evaluations, because one of them is the course evaluation. It's our you guys evaluate us.
Yeah, and the other one is surprise.
Another one is a surprise evaluation.
Yeah. Don't do more. So you will do the class evaluation that day, and we have an evaluation that day. Please come, tell your classmates, okay?
Especially the ones who have their toes at the edge of the cliff. You know, like,
Can we do that? And after Tuesday, we have the final evaluation, we have the final class. And after that, you have 3 submissions for the final report. August 7th by midnight, did you upload the Padlet to your 7 diagrams? 2 days after August 9 by midnight, you do your comments in Padlet to your submissions and others. And finally, you have your final report 11 August. So please put, it's already in Brightspace, but take a note of this line.
so by now you should have formed your groups. Have you formed your groups?
Yeah.
I'm raising my hand because I'm not in a group yet. Please raise your hand if you're not in a group yet. Okay. I hereby. Question. We talk after us?
Yeah.
Of course, always. You have a question? Okay. Everything's clear? All right. Okay, we ask you, what is the point? What is the point of all of this? Really, what's the point? Okay, please. And I guess I'll write over here. That sounds good.
Hey everyone, this week in our discussion post, we read 2 readings. We read the one about like metropolitan cities and like why people come to them, and the one about the villages and the system with the fishermen. And so we looked at everyone's discussion posts and we kind of analyzed some key themes as well as some questions that everyone seemed to be revolving around. So the themes, there are four that we analyzed, and we each are kind of going to explain one. So the first one I saw was community as a sense of public well-being, and cities as like gathered communities have the responsibility not just to pack people in and create density, but to improve the sense of public well-being and the strategic organization of cities should be used to increase public well-being. And so like a question that kind of reflects this as we look to the future would be how can cities accommodate increasing density while preserving the human scale communities that are essential to urban life?
And one of the second themes or questions that we saw for the discussion post were like connected systems beyond cities. So how can we connect communities without taking away individuality? So in order to have connectivity, we should improve between communities is access and not like from uniformity. So by doing so, we can, for example, have cities can be connected to shared transportation, shared corridors, and resource networks, while also preserving each other's neighborhoods. So like local culture, architecture, public spaces, and community identity.
And continuing the themes, we have city limits, and city limits is what questions after you create the connectivity. So if we have systems that connect different cities, what becomes a city? So if we have different communities that are able to connect through these systems that don't disrupt nature, that are able to connect without taking away their individuality, will people still want to move into big centric cities?
And then following off on that is how like communities can like help each other without sort of like one person governing them all. Because that helps like communities like adapt with one another and help a lot, especially with climate resilience, to help each other.
So based on these questions, we put together an activity for all of us to do where you can take the themes and the questions that you examined with the AI in your discussion, and you can kind of try a first attempt at putting it into practice, and we can all do it together, and then we can discuss our ideas. So you might recognize this city. This is Boston. So we're hoping that everyone will place a pin somewhere where in our experiences with this city, they've noticed opportunities to connect communities or to increase public well-being or to expand like a system that's working beyond like the physical boundaries that it usually takes place in. So for example, I would have to say, I would put my pin over here in Charlestown. That's where I did my co-op, and I would take the finish line, you can call it right over here, and then I would walk about a mile, and I noticed that there was a lot of like dense townhouses that had like private lawns, but there was not like private alleyways where they had a lot of individuality, but there is no public gathering space for all these young families. So that's something that
One of the design goals that I thought was better than ecological bridge that connects Boston into downtown Boston, because there, other than a highway, there isn't anything connecting both. And I thought that maybe having like a bike access or pedestrian access that could also have other ways to integrate like water collection and not disturb nature because it's still part of the river. And maybe that would be a nice design to implement to move on.
And I would say my design move would be sort of more off of the map and more towards next to Roxbury to Boston. Because a lot of the Roxbury residents don't really feel that connected to Boston because there's not really bus transit there. So I think adding like a train that connects Roxbury to the rest of Boston would be really nice.
I actually have two things. Well, actually, for yours. Yes, okay, so explaining what you did, there was one state orange line connection from Roxbury, but what I've heard overall from, I guess, Department of Transportation, as well as City Hall, they were discussing about expanding that orange line through Roxbury, but there are several things that are kind of like, how is it gonna work? That's the question I want to know. How will it work? It's gonna cut through a major part of, where between Ruggles and Manhattan. Because that's where this proposed line is going to go. Second thing, talking about a design move, I kind of want to put the Back Bay, for several reasons. One is that there is transportation, but it's only between, below the surface of Boylston. Anything beyond that is all like, just walking, and there's like sort of bike paths. Kind of focused on the area more. Because it would be nice if there's like just like a small little bus that goes like between Commonwealth Avenue and of course the public garden. That would be useful for a design move. So
Yeah, we have a lot of folks that put their design moves on here, so hopefully we can get to a lot of people. And do you want to share yours? Then we're gonna start calling them.
Mine was, adding more, pedestrian housing only bridges across Charles River. There's one called John Bridge, and I've noticed that a lot of, cyclists, pedestrians, or just people that run in the morning use it way more often than the regular bridges, since it's, more wider, less traffic, and
Okay. I think let's just start pointing to random dots, and if we point to your dot, then raise your hand and we'll have you explain your design move and maybe how it connects to some of the themes that we're talking about this week. So I guess I'll pick this one in East Boston here. This was this. Isaiah.
I'm not totally like sure of like how that area exactly looks, but maybe there's an opportunity for like a connecting sort of moment in between East Boston and where it connects to the other side.
And Charlestown.
Like
That sounds nice. Because I know my favorite chicken place is over on East Boston, but to get over there, it's pretty difficult and it takes a long time. But I mean, if they connected right to Charlestown, I'd go all the time.
Like your cable car.
That'd be pretty cool.
You've had,
yeah, I thought about that.
we've had students propose that, in studio.
Okay, so now John, quick one. Whose dot is this? In the lower right portion of the map. Raise your hand if this is your dot.
I'm not specifically, but mine's like one of the
Uh-huh.
there,
Right.
it's the south end. And I don't know, from my experiences going there, I've heard anecdotally that at night it's not as nice as it is gonna be. I don't have experience at all. But during the day, it seemed like there's like a lot of like eyes on the streets, like some small streets that allow for more pedestrian flow. There's like parks integrated within the area. So maybe you replicated that throughout areas. So again, I'm not very familiar with East Boston, maybe trying to implement that in other parts of the city.
Is there something from your discussion that you think you could bring into this idea?
My discussion was sort of like thinking about like what ends up working best sometimes is the natural way that cities develop for people, what's the local advantage, and that's sort of like a framework for that natural systems emerge. So maybe creating open spaces where people can gather and make, like, for example, community gardens or something like that.
And then you're talking about things at night, so like trying to figure out instead of like forcing activity into the street at night, like pulling people.
I also is because I've been to that area at night and only by bus. It's not really the best of areas, if I could say, because
Yeah, that's what you said.
it's I've been down there. It's rough. I've seen it rough, and I got confronted myself. Yeah, I'm not gonna go into details.
Yeah,
Okay.
To figure out like
Does anyone have this very? Sorry, guys.
But I just said some of the questions, but since you have more experience than I do with that. Do you have any like closest, like, how could that be improved through design opportunities?
Well, maybe safety is the top priority for the area, because it is below Madison Cass. And it's not really it's the whole industrial area, right, because that's see where you pinpointed it, that Lenny Market. I would say just, safety first, and then, that whole area needs like a whole transformation, like this dedicated bike path, like this barrier where it's like protected bike path down that way, because I know that's a really rough area.
Is there anything that you could take from your discussion to like implement into either the thing you proposed or Isaac proposed?
I would say just, good bike path and posts down that Mass Ave. Because I know it's not the best of areas and traffic could be you know what, and then just safety. I would recommend safety down.
A lot of people look at the scared of the focus middle area,
Yeah,
like urban events as far as the Boston.
it's like, I know, but there's near the common or like, it looks like a financial district near the downtown crossing. All right, if any of these thoughts are yours, raise your hand. Is there anyone that is really excited to share their idea and wants to raise their hand before being called on? Because we can just we can call people out, or we can start walking through and asking people where they put their dots. We can do that if that works better for you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
Okay, let's do it.
Go to the back row.
Where is it? Liz. Boston. Boston. Is it? That's the second one. Yeah, that lot. What's your have in mind for that lot?
I don't know. I was looking around, especially that's names that evidence activity. It looks very much like yeah, that's compared to like that area. But no,
I completely agree with that. I'm from walking through there. It's like the same, time I see there's all these schools like winding. There's so many bike lanes and so many different public parks, and then you cross up there, and it's like it's almost like once you get far enough away from the school, it's like the students don't live there anymore, and so you're done. Okay. Anyone that inspire anyone?
I did Marvel's Gate, connecting, or it is on the map there, maybe it's not. Anyway, it's where the Fenway, I guess, Back Bay fence meets the Esplanade, the Esplanade, I guess.
Is it like near that bridge in the lower left?
Basically, it's where Store Road Drive connects to Fenway.
Okay, yeah.
So, but it's already been proposed to change that intersection to provide more, like, street access,
Yeah.
like for pedestrians.
I've driven in that intersection and I've lost it and I've liked it. And I think it was never really like very intuitive experience at any point. Especially as when you have to go on the store and drive, you have to get in a lot of things to turn right. Or when you're like waiting to sit there, yeah. And then there's like a big there's like a big open space that's kind of green, kind of has paths, but there's nothing really there. And it's kind of like the end of that multiplex, and it's just not very.
It's the one place where the overlap is in contiguous.
Yeah, yeah. Is there anyone else? What were you thinking?
I put the broccoli over there on the right side.
Going on the bridge?
Yeah, it's really nice. I think if people want to go and stand the bridge,
Yeah.
Our stories, so people can like, it's like, I don't know if this is too long. Like, I'm just.
How would you draw people over the bridge? Because there's no shops there.
Well, like I walk on the like store drive like thing that people walk and stuff. I don't know, I'm pretty like interactive about something, so I guess like,
What is it that draws you?
I like to run a lot, so I think just like the water, I think it's very peaceful and like it's been walkable and stuff.
What did you do at the session?
My discussion on, like this past discussion, I did it on like the buy. And it's like my topic was the sitcom,
Oh, yeah.
and it was just talking about how IoT and like how like mosques are like surrounded by
No, the Wednesday discussion.
I can't remember the top of my head right now, but if I had mine, it's last
You
night.
remember the title that you gave it?
Remember what you read?
There's two
I,
choices.
yeah. Put me on the spot, I don't know.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
That's professional life for you.
Yeah, I know.
Speaking of professionalism, can you close your laptop?
I'm looking at tonight's meeting. It's true.
Rashida? Well, if you can close it soon. Okay. So any last things for you guys?
I mean, if that's our time, I feel free.
Well, we gave you more. So, can you go back a slide?
Well,
I had trouble with the third question. So let's try to revise and refine this question. Do people actually want to live in cities? Who wants to live in cities? Raise your hand. Who doesn't want to live in cities? Raise your hand. Okay. What are the variables? What are the factors that determine whether you want to live in cities or not? What are the variables? Yeah.
For your own decision,
Yeah.
like privacy.
Privacy,
Safety.
safety,
Access to opportunity,
what is it?
access to opportunity.
Opportunity zone. Other factors,
I think like the social aspect of it.
social,
Be able to grow what you think at the size of a state.
but for your decision.
Yeah.
Oh, what's the, what is it?
Being able to grow what you eat on the size of the state.
So. Okay,
No. Oh, no, I don't think.
John,
Always.
noise, yeah,
Walkability.
walkability. Opportunity, yeah, so I guess the big one is up to, also how much time we spend in cars. Right, living in the city can connect you to the world in ways that living outside of the city. So that helps, like, what are the limits? I guess that's a question about what are the limitations of living in cities and how do we make how to make cities more attractive, more appealing, to address noise, safety, opportunity. Okay, is that fair? Are there any other questions that belong up here? Okay, thank you, team. So, around the time you were born, I started teaching this class. And over the past couple of weeks, I've decided I'm not going to teach this class anymore. So this is the last lecture I'm giving. Like, after 20 years of teaching the class. And I want to reassure you, it has it's hardly at all related to the fact that about a quarter of you will never write a proper footnote, no matter how much guidance you get, how many points you lose. That has very little to do with my decision to stop teaching this course. So don't feel bad. I'm really doing it so I can publish, I can write and think more deeply about these same things. Maybe I'll come back to teaching it better after that break, but it's been great this year and for 21 years. And so here we go. Oh, no, 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 no. So the challenge of this is to bring it back full circle and tie it up with a bow. But of course, we're not going to do that. Of course, we're not going to close off this thing. The whole point, the whole objective of teaching this course effectively, really, honestly, any course, is to transfer a foundational knowledge to the next generation and push you, establish a foundation as best we can, and then push you and double bounce you. Like on a trampoline, that you're bouncing away. There's two people on the trampoline. Well, I'm the big fat guy, and you're the young light person. And right before you come down, I'm going to go boom, and then you're going to go shooting into the sky. That is the analogy that I prefer. That we are doing our best to give you a solid foundation and send you out into the discipline of architecture and related fields in a way that will allow you to quickly take on the big issues of the 21st century and play a leadership role in those challenges. And that's the goal. And I hope you get that sense. I hope you get a sense of how excited we are. In the context, I don't know if you listen to the news. Raise your hand. Do you listen to the news? I don't blame you. It can be very, very depressing. But I want to encourage you, every single depressing news piece holds within it an opportunity to do some very, very exciting things during your careers. So the worse things get, because you are design professionals, the more your creative juices should percolate up and bubble up, and the more you should identify, where's the point of entry? Where's the point of what can be done? What can design do? No, design can't change the way the government functions. Design can't change the evil that exists in people's hearts, the selfishness and greed of corporate. No, what can design do? Wait, oh, look at this thing. It's a very tiny bit of the world, but design can do that. Design can make a difference right there. And that's the job. That is the profession. And that's what we're trying to help you do. So I just want to point out two of the issues that came up. So a lot of you read, you engaged the readings, and then you critiqued AI for not really being able to translate it into concrete, actionable steps for architecture. The way I just, identified that one thing. So Tyrese decided, let's challenge AI to actually do that. What can be done? How do you make this actionable? And it was a very interesting way to engage AI, and it produced still a general description, but it's not so much that the operating system of governments and business and the economy. Government shouldn't be in the job of saying, here's what the world should look like. And maybe even architects shouldn't be in the business of saying, here's what the world should look like. Architects have a role to play in saying, here's what this piece of the world could look like. But more importantly, this is how a piece of the world could operate. And every time we take a single project and say, this is how a piece of the world can operate, it has implications for larger operating systems. What if we were designing the rules of the operating system that would produce these types of design outcomes on the ground? So the real message at the core of this course, I believe, is that every time we design a project, we are simultaneously designing, we are identifying opportunities to shift the rules of the operating system. And so I think this is really a way to get at that. What are the, is this on? Oh,
It's voila.
when I got my first cell phone, it took me several days to figure out why it wasn't working.
What's
Yeah.
on?
You have to turn it on. It won't ring unless you turn it. What did I? And then Taylor was getting at a similar thing. That it's not so much designing specific outcomes. It's designing the guidelines. They're not hyper specific that determine every detail, but her critique, in her critique, she's talking about establishing a structure of guidelines, right? Is that Catherine is Taylor? So when you close that laptop. Yeah, thanks. Okay. So here are the 4 parts. In other versions of this course, we would start, like when I first started teaching this course, this would be the first day. And we'd say, oh, hello class, welcome. This is architecture 3700, blah, blah, blah. My name's Robert Howard, I'm number 4. What defines a city? And we would start there. And then we move on. What are the first cities? But we're liberated from this, the burden of this. All the students would then just relax, settle in, and understanding that this was just like the entertainment on the deck of the cruise ship, and they could just let all this information wash over them because that has nothing to do with us. But by flipping this class so that we do it in reverse chronological order, we start the class with imagining the challenges, the life and death challenges that you will face in the year 2050. And what are you going to do to prepare yourself? So in that context, how do we understand these questions that have always been at the start of the traditional version of this course? Well, what is a city? In the traditional way of teaching this course, you can read 6 readings and go on week after week. And throughout time of the history of this course, people have said, oh, anytime the population rises to 20,000, that's a city. No, we have to update that. It's 50,000. No, it's 150. Blah, blah, blah. And if you read the Gutkind article, that book was incredibly ahead of its time. We don't care what the population size is. A city is because a city does, because a city does what it does. Now, arguably, Gutkind was making this argument in the 50s, almost 75 years, or more than 75 years ago. He was saying, as we connect with each other, the whole world is behaving the way we expect cities to behave. When I hear a song on the radio that's being broadcast from that radio station in Seattle, I quickly text my friend Mahmoud in Morocco, and I say, Mom, you wouldn't believe it. This was because we have an ongoing conversation, because when we ran into him in Marrakesh, he told us that we have to listen to this radio station in Seattle. This guy in Marrakesh was telling us about, teaching us about American musical culture. And he's never been out of Morocco. So go figure. That's the world we live in. We are instantaneously connected across boundaries, across language barriers. Every day I engage with forums, speaking, in Dutch, in Catalan, in Indonesian. The world is a city. The whole world is a city now. So this question, I'm so glad we didn't spend more than this past 2 minutes on it. We go into how human settlements came up. How did humans, starting in the Great Rift Valley in Africa, how did humans spread out across the world, and why certain concentrations? And notice that the interpretation, looking backward towards history, it's always in terms of economic production. So this is less a lesson about how cities actually formed, and more a lesson about our prejudices. We see everything through economics, through growth, through money and wealth. And what are the mechanisms of economic productivity? And so that's how we see the whole world. And if we were going to be more honest and talk about things that really matter to us, because we're getting ready to take leadership roles in the 21st century, we don't care what the first settlements looked like. What we care about is their operating systems. We need to understand how our operating system works. Where are the opportunities to make changes to that operating system? So it's very useful to look at alternative operating systems, like we did last week with Islamic cities, a different operating system of Sharia law and judicial decisions produces a different physical world. And what is the interplay between the rules of the operating system and the physical world? Sometimes you set up the rules and it produces the physical world. Sometimes you set up the physical world and it produces the rules of the operating system. And those are especially the instances we care about. So as we look at this, that's interesting. People entered through their roofs, the archaeological evidence. And the interesting thing is they didn't have streets between their homes. Their homes were partially buried. They entered through the roofs. So this is an example, like Islam, that had the courtyard instead of the object building. This is a case where the streets, the public realm, were the rooftops. It was the entire thing, and the dwellings were in. So this was what we imagine that looked like. So it's interesting to us in the context of 2050 challenges, because it demonstrates a completely different physical configuration that is provocative and helps us imagine alternatives. If this is how that could have worked, what is possible now? And what are the rules that go along with this? Do they help us improve cities? Does it empower local self-organization? Does it support individual dignity? And does, even as we densify, is there maintenance and reinforcing of human scale experiences? And the alternative to economics is spirituality and belief systems. And really, this comes back to a theme that we've been working with all semester, is our 20th century problems, the problems that were produced by the successes of the 20th century, especially after World War II, is that we created these simplistic, linear models of how the world works. And we imposed them on the built environment and on how societies work. And what did that look like physically? The big transformative forces produced automobile dependency, single-use zones, and a fixation on wealth and growth and economics and affluence, and the struggle for affluence, no matter how harmful that struggle turned out to be from a more holistic point of view. So you've heard it before, the the success of the solutions of the 20th century are the problems. They produced the problems of the 21st century. So the problems that your generation is being asked to address are a result of the solutions that architects in the 20th century were so successful at doing. If the architects in the 20th century had not been so miraculously successful, we wouldn't be in these troubles that we're in. So we look back at the 20th century to understand how we produce those problems. And then we keep looking back beyond that rupture of modernism. We look for pre-modern operating systems for ideas about what used to work and how those things that used to work for millennia were ended as soon as the European exploration of the world and colonialism and slavery and extractive capitalism. What were those operating systems and what were the physical forms that were there before? And what can we learn from those operating systems that predate the current catastrophic 20th century operating system? And so religion is a big one. And so we look back at the religion of Çatalhöyük and how every dwelling was the same. They didn't have a special monumental architecture for the temple. They just assigned that role to one of the houses, and that became the temple. So that's interesting. So this is the way we question. This is the way we interrogate the evidence of history. We don't have time for this. But we look beyond Çatalhöyük, we go forward, we look at China, we look at Egypt, and we notice that all of these early settlements, different settlement traditions, different settlement formal spatial institutional arrangements. The first ones all had to do with water. Isn't that interesting? And this fits the pattern that we're talking about. In the 20th century, we ignored water. When there was water, we put it in a pipe, except for in Boston. We created the Emerald Necklace as our water control system. Brilliant, way ahead of its time. But in the rest of the world, we put all the water underground in pipes, or we put them in hardened canals. And a lot of the analysis work that we've been looking at on Tuesdays has to do with water landscapes and how we need to rethink them. And basically, we have to go back. And the characteristics of urban design, urban development, landscape design seem to all boil down to the same formulation. You carefully observe natural forces in a landscape. You observe the ebbs and flows, the patterns that occur prior to human presence. And you observe how that works. And then with that understanding, you intervene. You design an intervention into the built environment. And you create the conditions for the most favorable outcomes, not just to maximize profits, but to support the operation of a complex adaptive system, which is an ecosystem. So the ecosystem that is present prior to human presence needs to be understood, and then the intervention needs to build on that complex system understanding in order to create positive outcomes without the unintended consequences of poverty, imposing poverty on people, climate devastation, all of these unintended consequences that are being tolerated as we make things worse and worse and worse. So all of these water systems, that's a valuable way to look at these histories. No time. And it's interesting, and it's kind of a fluke. And Mohenjo-Daro is a water system civilization. Recent archaeology has uncovered how this civilization thrived because of its management of the water systems. So we can look at the Chinese system. We can look at India and its traditions. And in all of these things, we're taking the architectural forms, formal spatial arrangements, and we're reading into those formal spatial arrangements. What are the institutional arrangements? And in the case of both China and India, these great traditions had to do with spiritual systems, spiritual operating systems that create this hierarchy. But we're struggling to match the current practices of Hinduism with the physical fabrics that we've inherited and still exist. And because everything that existed in the pre-modern world have been destroyed, and now we have nothing left, right? Wrong. It turns out that sometimes architects have to take on a role in the world that requires us to engage with pre-modern institutions, pre-modern operating systems. It happens so often. Actually, I think it's kind of a fluke, but 2 out of 2 of the architects teaching this course have spent significant parts of their careers working with these architectures produced out of operating systems that predate modernism. So here's an example from my career where I learned Italian. I was going to go to Italy, but then and I was all interested in how courtyard architecture works in Rome and the cities of Italy. But everyone's done that. And I got distracted because a friend of mine gave me this photo from a place that I'd never really heard of. And I was intrigued by this photo enough to learn Indonesian, to apply for a grant. And then when the recession hit in 1991, I said, before they could lay me off, I'm out of here. I'm accepting this 3-month grant to go to this place I'd never been before. So I showed up at this gate on the first day of my arrival, and I walked in, and for $3, I got to stay the night. When I woke up in the morning, I came out here, and there was a guy there, and I could speak some Indonesian. I said, tell me about this gate. He said, oh, it's a noble's house from the medieval times of royalty. And then he said, it's a miniature version of the palace. And I said, palace? There's a palace? I didn't know. He said, yeah, we'll go out here, turn right, and then ask someone. So I did that. And that's how one thing led to another. And before you knew it, I was looking at architecture in this pre-modern operating system. I found my way to the palace. I was sitting there talking to the guy sitting in front of this gate at the palace. And he was saying, yeah, there's a museum in there. And so I'm thinking, oh, it's this old historic preservation project. And then a car pulls up and this woman gets out. And the person I was talking to did this. He went like this to the person getting out of the car. And I said, whoa, hey, what'd you do just there? What was that? What just happened there? He said, oh, I was just acknowledging the princess. And I said, what? Princess? And he said, yeah, there's 36 princes and princesses. What? Of 6 wives of the king. King? So he's blowing my mind And soon after that, I became the royal architect for the King of Java, helping him to restore his buildings of the family because they were impoverished. They had no money, believe it or not. But the palace is a really interesting complex of very uninteresting, non-monumental buildings. So it turns out the thing that was of value were not the buildings themselves, but it was the cosmological role that the buildings and the complex played, because this is the Hindu Javanese universe, where the gods occupy the center, and there's oceans and continents, until the big ocean beyond the seven rings exists, and there's a vast sea of nothingness. And in order to perform his role as king, he uses the palace complex to control the flow of good fortune from heaven into earth that enters through the navel. The umbilical cord from the heavens connects to the center of the palace complex, and all good fortune flows out of that palace complex. And that's what the physical manifestation architecturally was of this cosmological model. And they took it very seriously. When a volcano erupted in one part of the kingdom, they find that part of the kingdom that's associated with that part of the palace, and they give offerings at that point to calm the gods that were causing the eruption. And they still were doing it when I was there. They're still doing it when I was there in May. I went back and visited a few months ago, right before the course started. And this is the instrument of controlling the balance between heaven and earth. And the buildings are interesting enough. But what's more interesting, and I helped for the first time, because I had access to an aerial photograph, I was part of the process of documenting the palace for the very first time in history. And it's not so much the buildings and the architecture, it's more the spaces and the activities that occur in these spaces. And all of these rituals are performed in order to support the flow of good fortune out to the rest of the realm. And so the architecture is just one part of the operating system. The operating system is much more complex. And as you can see, this is kind of a bizarre combination of the Ottoman costume, the Dutch Hales Code. It's an example of syncretism, which you studied in History Theory 1, which is the practice of taking cultural influences and having them meld together and becoming a new third cultural formation. And this is the king at the center of it all. And he's the one I coordinated with to help restore a lot of the palace, but in the context where the palace is not the important thing. The architecture, the buildings were really a vehicle for helping the social community, the operating system associated with the architecture, to help create that operating system in a healthier manifestation. So I participated in all these ceremonies, I documented them, and then the rebuilding of the palace after a fire, the king putting in a golden nail base of the pillar, all of these religious rituals, even the cleaning of the buildings once a year, sweeping the water off and having people scramble to collect that dirty water and pour it in their children's rice bowl in the morning to make sure they're healthy, or pouring it into the rice fields. So these are operating systems that are still going simultaneously with modern capitalist world. A Dutch carriage given to the king by the Queen of Netherlands is now a sacred object within the Javanese religion, with offerings being given to it every Wednesday night. This Baroque European architecture, the Ottoman fez, the European brass band, the Dutch tailscoat, but still with the Javanese sarong wrapped around the waist and the sacred sword tucked into the belt in the back. The Hindu Yona, Linga and Yoni symbols of male and female genitalia, you would think would not be allowed in a Muslim ceremony, but this is the celebration at the core of Islam, but using these symbols from Hinduism, because all of these religious influences converged in Java and were taken on. This is a mosque. Doesn't look like a mosque because Islam adapted to the local architectural forms. This is basically a Hindu Javanese form that you still see in Bali, because Bali is still Hindu. And here it became the architectural form of Islam throughout Southeast Asia. So the lesson of all this is that there is an interplay between the life of human societies and the architectural forms. And it's not always the static architecture that is the thing. It's often the process of constructing that architecture. This is an offering that was required before we started to restore some of the buildings. It's the rituals, and it's how the operating system deals with the architecture, both in the original construction, the use of the architecture, restoration of the architecture, and the extension of the architecture, and how life unfolds within these practices. This is my friend Pa Asmo, who is simultaneously a priest, an architect, and a builder. And he and I both wearing these ribbons, which are required as a sign to the Queen of the South Seas, that you're a friend of the kings. We shaped some with hand tools, some of the pillars that went into the most sacred tower, where I think I was one of the first outsiders allowed into that tower. And then the Aga Khan Award for Architecture was held there at the culmination of our restoration work. And there's His Highness the Aga Khan and His Royal Highness the King of Java, and a much younger version of me translating between the two of them all night long. And the Minister of Culture. So then the story of Bali, which is a really interesting example of how complex adaptive systems are still operating. And if you did the reading, the Stephen Lansing and Maurice Cox reading, what's interesting, I think he wrote it poorly. It's very technical, all these mathematical, right? Did you find that? It's all these mathematical formulas. Please don't do that to us. And then at the very end, he tells the most interesting story. So I'm going to make it even more interesting. I was sitting in Bali. I was working on a UN project to develop facilities in 3 villages to help them maintain their culture and their architecture while inviting visitors who could pay money and help them send their kids to college. And so while I was doing that, I caught typhoid, as one does. So I was hanging out in Bali in a bungalow, recovering from typhoid, and I hear all these people talking, and they're not speaking Indonesian, they're speaking English. And it's weird to hear English in Indonesia that doesn't have an accent. They were actually had an American accent, And so I find out that there's all these computer science graduate students from California. And it turns out they were trying to figure out how the rice system works. And they were there because a few years earlier, there was a crisis and there was a famine. It was because the operating system of the Suba had been disrupted. So for about 1,000 years prior to that point, rice was being planted and harvested in the southern part of Bali, one of the most densely populated agricultural areas on the planet. And somehow they were managing water and pests to an optimal way to maximize the harvest of rice. And they did it by following a religious practice, system of temples up and down the watersheds that governed when they planted and how much water they shared upstream to downstream in this cooperative, complex, adaptive operating system. And the rules were coordinate with a bunch of other farmers to always plant at the same time and harvest at the same time to reduce the threat of pests. Then leave a gap so that when you plant, other people are not planting, so that when you're done with that and you're harvesting, they're just starting to plant. That disrupts the pests. But it's a problem if everyone's planting at the same time. Everyone needs water at the same time. You have to flood your rice fields. So it's a challenge. How do you balance these competing needs? And if there was a capitalist operating system, it would be easy. And it would be disastrous. The farmers who are upstream would plant and they would use as much water as they want. And the next farm down the water system would have less water. And about half the farmers downstream would have no water. And they would basically go out of business. And the total rice production would be a tiny fraction. So it's a clear demonstration of how a cooperative, complex, social, religious system outperforms what a capitalist operating system would do. But we have to learn the hard way. So the Green Revolution in the 60s and 70s, it's a scientific way to boost rice yields all over the world as an effort to reduce hunger and famine. And it had the opposite impact. As soon as the rice farmers were competing with each other, they were not sharing water and they were harvesting in an uncontrolled way so that the pests, the locusts would feed on one rice field and then they'd move on to the next rice field, which was just starting to be ready for harvest. And they would propagate and the numbers would grow and they would move to the next rice field because there was always a rice field nearby that was ready to be devastated by these locusts. So the first year, the rice harvest went up. The second year, it went up again, but not as much. The third year, it went down a little bit, but so they sprayed everything on the island. The government brought in crop dusters and they sprayed pesticides all over the island. And they doubled down and said, we're really going to do it. And the fourth year, the crop failed. And in the fifth year, farmers went back to the original system. But no one understood why the original system worked. So Stephen Lansing, an anthropologist, worked together with the computer science department, and they figured out how the system of temples, from the temple at the very top to the temples at each major junction, down to the smaller shrines at every branching of the irrigation system, how this architectural system that had produced these lush landscapes for 1,000 years, how this rice sequence worked. And we were able to bring Wentworth students to Bali and we planted rice, we looked at the architecture of the Subak system while we were there studying how to design and build bamboo structures. But we spent a day planting rice and learning all about the system. We also got to explore the irrigation tunnels, these amazing constructions where they were able to dig tunnels for the water through these volcanic rock mountains. And we actually walked through a couple of them as we were exploring the landscape. So we got to explore the built environment that made all of this work. And in terms of operating systems that are available to us to emulate and to manifest through our architecture, we're lucky to have Elinor Ostrom's work, the first woman who won a Nobel Prize in economics, and her complex adaptive systems of community, common pool resource management. And it leaves us with a very clear demonstration of what's wrong with 20th century operating systems and the architectures that are reinforcing these rules is when we value everything as price and nothing else, no other values matter. And then we say, if it's a goods and service, there are goods and services and there are bads and disservices. And if it generates money, we don't care whether it's bads or goods. A war is economic stimulation. Even though it's highly destructive, it's growth. So wars are wonderful, and as much as preschool education, anything that generates a flow of money from one place to another is considered to be a positive thing. So bads are valued the same as goods. Services and disservices, no difference. So don't be surprised if you're not making a distinction between bads and goods, services and disservices, that you have outcomes the way they are. And then finally, we don't care about extraction to the point of depleting resources. We don't put a price on that. We don't really have a proper mechanism for pricing that, not because we can't think of one, but because we're not allowed to price it. The governance operating system will not allow us to price extraction. Similarly, how much does it cost to pump carbon dioxide into the atmosphere? What's the price of that? It's exactly zero in the United States. It's free. So in the absence of a price penalty, in the absence of incentives, disincentives to extraction and pollution, the rules are whoever extracts and pollutes the most, the fastest, gets the most money. They're the ones who win. So these are the rules that Elinor Ostrom identified. These are design principles. So design principles, and I should have rewritten them so the first word is, of course, an imperative verb, right? That's how we like it. Design principles. Clearly define the boundaries. Allocate rules. Define the rules of allocation to match the local conditions, etc. Monitor the outcomes, sanction bad behaviors, and create an incentive. Basically, it boils down to create an incentive structure so that you are rewarding positive behaviors that produce positive outcomes in terms of the larger complex operating system. And this is a way, and Elinor Ostrom arrived at these by studying indigenous practices that still exist in traditional communities up to the present. So this is a method of mobilizing and developing an understanding of indigenous operating systems that are still available for us to access today. And will be a big part of what you do in Studio 7. So it comes back to what we looked at in the first lecture, to the incentive structure that is at the heart of the 20th century operating system that we must overcome. It is difficult for a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. This is at the heart of the 20th century operating system. You can't ask me to understand something and then reward me for not understanding it. I am a creature of the incentive structure within which I operate. Any of you, if you became the president of ExxonMobil, would produce negative, harmful results for the world, because you are stuck in a position where you either maximize shareholder results in the next quarter, or you are fired. If you are the president of Wentworth Institute of Technology, not so different, all the way on down to your faculty. So what the key, if this is the core problem of our operating system that got us in this trouble, the key to moving beyond it is how do we make people's salary dependent on them doing the right thing? So you need to change the rules, the incentive structures, so that these rules of the 20th century operating system, where whoever extracts and dumps the most wins, you've got to replace those with 21st century operating systems, where we model the world as nested systems. This is basically simplifying Elinor Ostrom's design principles. Create an incentivize a balance of holistic outcomes, not just wealth creation, but other things, how much carbon, how much inequality, all of these things need to be measured and incentivized, used as incentive to produce positive outcomes. And then every chance you get, every cycle, every iteration, adjust the operating system to perform better. If this sounds familiar, it's basically because this is what we do in the design studio. We try something out, we try to model something, and then we see how it operates. Does it produce positive outcomes? We critique it. That's why we have crits. That's why we have critics. That's why we have crit rooms. The whole thing we do in architecture is basically this model. So you already are experts at it. And then we iterate. We try again to do it better. We evaluate the outcomes, and then we adjust the rules so that it produces a better performing design. So it's all very familiar. So it's not surprising that we have thesis projects every year, more and more of them, that develop projects that actually have an impact on systems, and on a good day, start to have an impact on one of the problems. So it's not so much the project design, and this is a challenge. You're about to complete Studio 6. You're about to achieve the thing that most architecture schools, it's all they care about, and they do it at the very end, right before you walk across the stage of graduation. But you're about to complete it at the end of your junior year. Now you have 1 or 2 more years to build on that and try to get your project design not to only produce a beautiful, compelling building. Yes, we want you to do that. But beyond that, we want you to produce designs that have an impact on the rules of the operating system. And I'm going to end here, but just to recap some of the things, I believe that as Ignacio and I look at the outcome of the final project, the Toward the 2050, when we open up the Padlet, when we open up Brightspace and see those position paragraphs, we're going to see a collection of design principles that are held together by a larger overarching approach to the design principles that have to do with incentivizing high performance, complex adaptive operating systems. And it's not so far removed. If you're having trouble envisioning what this looks like, well, you've been doing it all semester long, every Tuesday in your analysis work. It could be as simple as thinking about what does it mean to move from single-use zones, single-family housing, and nothing but single-family housing as far as the eye can see, to mixed-use developments, mixed-use overlay districts, with lots of different complex interactions occurring every day. Think of it as shifting from mobility systems where it's about the car, only the car, that's all there is, car, to complex operating systems of complete streets where there are cars, but there's not just cars. You can also choose any one of these other modes of moving around. And the combination of those two in transit-oriented developments, all while preserving human scale, which is at the heart, if anything lies at the heart of several of these, especially most recent, it is the development of density in cities that is car light. And so that's density that reinforces human scale. And if you ever have a chance to do a study abroad in Europe or in Turkey, and you find yourself, even beyond school, when you find yourself in these environments, notice how human scale these historic centers are when cars are removed out of the picture, partially or completely. So it shouldn't be that hard to visualize what the world looks like when you organize the built environment in terms of complex adaptive operating systems that result in richer, more complex, and more empowering environments that the operations of the architecture in a daily fashion reinforces the agency of individuals, the dignity of individuals, where they have choice, even if they're not the wealthiest individuals, especially if they're not the wealthiest individuals in the society. When you target those communities that are historically most victimized by these operating systems, that's where you have the greatest leverage to flip it and turn it around and make something completely new. So that's where I'm going to end it. Thank you very much. It's been a great summer. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Guys, I will be dark late today because I have so many things in my head. And I'll do my best to put everything together with a certain level of. So sorry if I mess up today. I will. For sure that I will. So probably listening these questions, probably what I want to answer is why city matters. Why we live in cities. And probably my answer is because this is the place we can have relationships with others. This is the place we can have connection with others. When I try to answer all of these questions talks about how we relate to others, different types of others in cities, and how this happens better in environment like cities. So how we can connect with others in communities is the big question. So I'm just trying to talk about communities as a basic preexistence of the society. So to start talking about that, I want to talk about this research. It's the largest research in the history of humanity. So this is the guys who were researching about happiness for more than 60 years at the University of Harvard. So they were exploring a lot about why some people are more happy than others. So can you guess the conclusion? Do you already know that? Why some people are more happy than others? Yeah.
The people that don't really have like they choose not to care about certain things. They choose like they're happier because they can like not focus on like the bad, but like just do like the moment.
Yeah, honestly, no, that was not the answer. That's a good one, but that was not their conclusion. That is one of the conclusions, but not the main one. What else? Yeah.
The environment.
Their environment, no. They found there are people that are living in very shitty places and they are more happy than others that are living in more wealthy areas. Yeah.
I don't know if you kind of just said it, but my thing is that like say someone who's living in poverty versus someone who has immense wealth. So the person in poverty can be happy, the rich person can be sad.
Yeah. Yeah. So the answer is not wealth. You can see many people in the world that have a lot of money. They are really angry. And they tweet very bad things. And there is one that comes to my mind. I don't want to mention. Yeah.
So like those that have friends.
Those have friends. That was their main conclusion.
That's what I was just gonna
Yeah, that was their main conclusion. Is it surprising? Not really. So you can have money, you can have education, you can have a place to live, but if you don't have friends, you won't be happy. That was the conclusion by this guy. And I think, and that friendship happens when we relate to other in communities. And I think this is very meaningful for me today, for many reasons. Not only because this is not my last class in this course, but because it's yours. So friendship is one of the most important things that they have discovered and we create in city. And this means a lot to me after watching the Odyssey. Did you watch that movie? Raise your hand that you already was there. It's so amazing, guys. If you haven't there, go there and watch it. We were discussing about that in the last class. Can you pronounce this word for me? Xenia. That is the most important word, in my opinion, of that movie. Xenia is basically hospitality. And it's the sacred relationship between different people, the guest and the people who live in home, and how you build through hospitality different type of relations. For me, that movie means a lot because this movie is about migration. At the end, I'm a migrant, and hospitality is basically how you believe that you can have friendship with others, even if you don't know them, and this otherness creates a bigger community beyond the one that is close to your home. So in order to explain that in theory, I'm gonna go to this book, Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam. He explained, and I want you to take a position. There are two types of relations that we have in society: the strong one and the weak ones. The strong connections is the one that we have with our families, with our friends, with the people who we relate with. So now I have a strong connection with Robert, for example. And I have a weak connection with the guy who's walking down the street. I have a weak connection with the librarian, but it's stronger with the guy on the street. And I have a weakest connection with Audrey than with Robert, but it's stronger between Audrey and the guy who's walking the street. Are you following me? We have a weak and a strong connection. So what is better to create social capital and to create better cities?
An opportunity.
And create opportunity. That's a good one. And to create opportunity. What is better, the weak one or the strong ones? Raise your hand if you believe we need more strong connections. Oh, Jake, Audrey, okay, that's good. Raise your hand if you believe that you need more weak connections. Oh, come on, you have to raise your hand, one of them. Wait, raise your hand if you are undecided. Wait, raise your hand if you need, yeah. If you need both, we need both. Yeah, that's the big conclusion of Robert. But the most important thing here is that we need not only strong connection, but also weak connections in order to create opportunity. And you know, that is a flow, that is something that flows. I'm gonna give you an example for me as a migrant, talking about the senior. When I came to this country, 2015, I barely knew Robert. We met once in 2012, 2013, but for me, it was another guy out of many.
But you
And
came dancing at my house.
yeah, but I came late. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Sorry, I have to tell that story.
Yeah.
Can I? So look at the cultural differences. Robert invited me and a group of Venezuelans to his dance party. And he said, come from 8 to 10. And in Venezuela, if you tell a person, come to 8 to 10, it's between 8 and 10, you know? And commonly, if you are respectful, you go at 10 to 9:55. So he told me, come to dance in my party, in my dance party from 8 to 10. And we arrived at 9:50 with a cooler of beers, expecting to dance for the whole night. And 10 minutes later, the party was over.
Because it was co-housing and all my neighbors who are in power and local self-organizing, they said, oh, no dancing after 10.
Yeah, but we misunderstood the thing. You know, can you see the cultural difference there? I was clearly there. So, but at that moment, when I came to this country in 2015, I barely knew Robert. He was my weak connection that time. And I received, because of Senior, because of your hospitality, I received an email. Do you remember that email or not? No, you don't. I received an email of 3 pages explaining everything that I have to know in this country. And especially how to, what is the best school for my kids? What is the best place to buy food if you don't have that amount of money? What is the best place to go to a grocery or to a healthcare?
I don't remember.
You sent me a 3 pages email. I received that email for a weird guy. It's still weird, but it's now
A strong connection.
strong connection. So it was a weak connection, and I needed that. It was very important for me. So that weak connection that comes from Senior, that you receive others and you engage with others, helps people to engage with the system and create more opportunities. So what this guy said is that the guy who received you from the library, from the grocery store, from any institutions, in this case, Wentworth, it's much more important to increase opportunities. Sometimes that's a strong connection. Because that helps you to create that networks, that helps you to create stronger, larger, and richer communities. So what I'm trying to say with this one is, if we can answer something, we can find an answer to this question is how you create different forms of connections and how you create the space for this to happen. Today is different. Now we have a strong connection, but this one of the strongest connections that I have in this country now is with Robert. He transformed into a weak, into a strong connection. That also can happen with your different type
That's
of.
when I gave your kids bicycles.
Yeah, this is actually you get them bicycles. So what he says is that sometimes you have connections that are strong that looks inside, and sometimes you have connections that are weak that looks outside. This create, according to this guy, bond connection, create bonds between others. So the bond that I have with Robert in this moment is different that I have now with Peter. But also he said that it's very important the bridge connection, because that creates the weak connection that bridge you to opportunities that are beyond you. And he said that the space that you create between this creates everything. So in this movie, what I'm trying to say is, it doesn't matter more. It's not as important the different spaces that we have, but the way you build a system of network that connect each other in order to produce bridge connections. So, but moving backwards to I'm gonna move really fast here because I want to give time for the guys. So what he said that the beginning of society would really move backwards to the beginning of civilization. Most of civilization were strong connections. So for example, this is an example of Toulouse in China. I'm gonna skip this. And the Toulouse in China, basically the community lived surrounding a building, that was really close to us outside because we have to protect from the environment. So we were trying to protect from the from everything that is that could be threatening the environment. So you have these toulouse in the middle of the land, and the community was basically in a strong connection. All of them were families looking towards inside. So and that is one of the reasons, because we have the primary civilization, and they have this clear connection with the cosmos. So they were looking inside. They were all families. If you were outside, you were a threat, and you were looking each other towards a center in connection to the sky. So there was a vertical connection, a cosmological vertical connection, because the land and the sky into a circle that have this bond connection. And I have here many examples about this, and everything happened inside. How this primary civilization happened. Also in Ubuntu in Africa, that is a community that builds spaces for bonded connections, strong connections, families living together in clusters that looks towards a center, and that center is connection to the sky. Sometimes that happens in a hut, sometimes that happens in a cave, because you have to be protected from the environment, because the environment was a threat, and you live there without between families, and that is one of the reasons, because this was one of the spaces of the Force Awakens movie, but they were protecting here against the dark force of in this case of Darth Vader. Yeah. So the origin of the civilization in many of these cases were creating clusters that looks towards inside in families, trying to be strong and protect yourself to the environment. And this is, for example, a case I was very lucky to work with this community in the middle of the Amazon forest. This is the Yanomami indigenous people that they basically cleared an area in the forest and create this circular hut called chabono. And so you know that if you're moving here, you have to protect from the wild, and you have all the community activities happen inside that huge chabono. So from inside, you have the life of community, the relationship with your strong connections, and this is something that repeats several times across not only Venezuela but also Brazil and Colombia. And it's the same idea of strong connections, bonded connection that happens inside. So we will be also working with indigenous community next semester, this time in this town, Namika and Durham. And we have learned that, and this is something that I already told you that last week, is so Dennis Poilo told me, right? Let me skip that, go back for a second here. So Dennis Poilo told us that we used to live in a strong, isolated spaces, but now, after we know that civilization is not wild anymore, we can start opening the bond connections towards our weak connections to engage with others. So how we transitioned between the strong connections and the weak connections to create these networks of relations is the big question that I will leave open to it from this class. So these are my two takeaways that I have learned working with indigenous communities. One is, I am who I am because of others. Actually, the word, there are many words in indigenous people. So the word kapiri in Yetuana means relationship. It actually means exactly this one. I am who I am because of others. How we cannot define ourselves without the contribution of the others, and that's the reason Cecilia is that important. We welcome others, and then there is a sacred relationship between us and the others in order to create that relationship, and that defines me. So that the way I treat others define me, and that's the reason, because connections and relationship is as important to create human scale, to create dignity, to empower self-organization, and to make cities more attractive. It's basically how we create relationships between different people. And that, for me, that is the main thing that I have been learning in this class. And the second one is what Dennis told us: we can happen. we can have these strong connections that create friendship, make us happy, but at the same time, have weak connections that help us to bridge with others and create opportunities. And these things can transition, and these things can only happen in the network of relations that we have here. So at the end, Robert asked us at the beginning what cities exist, and I have a group of examples. What was your first question today? Why? What cities? Why we have cities? So cities and public spaces is the place where we can have celebration, where we can have protest, where we can have where we can engage with others in different forums. And so cities is the place where public space is the place where we can exercise this type of friendship or this type of networks to create opportunities with others. So, and that's the reason because the cities study that. So actually, that's probably a topic for another class, guys. But something that is happening is strange is because of digital network connections, many people are moving away cities, and there is a new trend called new rurality. New people moving to rural areas because now they can be connected with other. They don't need the city to connect with other anymore. However, during COVID, we discovered that was a lie. Many people decided or understood that they needed others. At the end, they need physical bonding, physical connection with others. In cities and only in public space, we can create knowledge and culture. We can have protests. We can celebrate, even with friends. So if you have been there, this is me and Robert with our friends. Thanks to that experience of senior that he welcomed me, and now we become friends and we go to public space sometimes to celebrate.
We just ran into each other.
Yeah.
We didn't come together.
Yeah. So see, if I have one message here, guys, is connection with others. That's what makes city what they are and what makes them so powerful. And this connection could be strong, they could be weak, and all of them are needed in order to create network societies. This is almost what I have to do today because I have 7 minutes left. So we have 5 minutes for the what's the point. But before that, I have a gift for you, Robert.
Oh,
It's a Venezuelan chocolate. Just to thank
oh, thank you.
the hospitality that you have.
Oh, thank you. Grant.
What's the point thing, please? Oh yeah. I want the picture, please. Oh please, come here. With the chocolate. We have. We will allow you to have a photo back of the camera, please. Take a photo. You can send it to the photo. It's called.
Yeah. So who has a camera that goes this way? Great.
Okay, what's the point thing? While they are coming, this Venezuelan is Venezuelan cocoa made with New England people by a German chocolatier. So this demonstrates how Senia works and how migration makes amazing product.
And it's part of the United States.
It's part of the United States thing.
How do you exit the side sheet?
Yes, here, am I right?
Yeah. That's right. So before the lecture, we kind of outlined a couple of questions that we were all having during the discussion. And then we discussed them further after writing them on the board. We discussed 4 themes about well-being, about connecting communities, about like what cities can do to like make themselves attractive and make them a good place for people to live. And the way that people can like enrich their own lives through collecting and like participating in human scale systems. So I think we'll each go through and kind of share something that we took away from the lecture as it answers the questions that we brought up. To me, it was about I think what Ignacio was saying about Xenia and about the circular dwellings, both in China, Brazil, and Venezuela, where people found ways to come together in like a shared space that like directly address something that was previously stopping them from coming together, which was the wild. They kind of built a barrier against that, and then found space to harbor like their own like community events. And so I think like in the analysis, some maybe you could look for um places that acknowledge a barrier and design to create a space like disregarding that barrier to allow connection.
So can you go back to community systems and how we can have connected communities? So based on Ignacio's lecture, I took notes that a successful city or cities that connected are influential by breaking the barriers of language, culture differences, and able to be globally connected. And we can do that by exploring bond connections, especially weak ones. So for example, it reminded me of an ad that I saw in the World Cup, and it was the Airbnb World Cup, and it was basically saying about, did you know salsa was invented with Puerto Ricans to Cuban rhythm to New York, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was born with Japanese to judo to Brazil, and when North African frying traditions met Spanish dough, Spain met the churro. And it just reminded me how we can we are who we are because of others.
One of the things that I learned is that cities in general, they don't need to be just for profit. Cities can be communities together. And with the operating systems that we learn and with the culture that we have been cultivating over time, those are what creates a city.
I think going off of what Jennifer both said, like taking like from other communities in a way that like and adapting to your community and like working together, be like it's really nice, and that's what makes obviously a city, and just building multiple communities that like thrive together. They're good.
Roll sessions again. Good luck today. Good luck today, the review events.